I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And joining me tonight are two of my favorite people, and I really do mean that. Jeff Timmer is the senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. He's also a former executive director of the Michigan Republican Party. And Joe DeSano is a veteran Democratic strategist in races in Michigan and across the country. He also happens to be my better half. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me in your life.
Yeah. Glad to be here as always with you. And it's nice to be here with Joe, who I've known and worked with for more than 20 years, worked against and with on different things. So it's, well, we work together on saving the republic and democracy and all those little things now. So.
Yeah, you guys have actually known each other longer than Joe and I have known each other. So.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're doing the show a dozen years ago, you guys would be on opposite sides of the aisle. You'd probably be fighting, maybe throwing some curse words, some hands. But so how did we exactly get here where the two of you basically, I think you agree on a lot more than you disagree on these days?
Well, I mean, it's really simple from my perspective. My party lost its goddamn mind and, turned into a cult, to a clownish buffoon, corrupt moron. That's kind of the Cliff Note version.
Jeff and I seem to be characters from a different time where we didn't question each other's motives. Because when Jeff was an opponent on things, I mean, I never thought his worldview was completely different than mine. There were a lot of things we didn't agree on, but American democracy was never a question, So as he so eloquently put, they lost their minds, post Obama, and here we are.
Yeah, and I know you've seen a lot of your Republican strategist friends go to the dark side, embrace Trump, even though in private they trash him. They still do. Why do you think it's been so hard for other Republicans to do what you did, Jeff, and walk away and stand on principle?
Oh, boy, I mean, backbone and courage are short commodity and short supply in the Republican Party, that's for sure. And we've seen some of the reasons why in the last couple of weeks in the Indiana state Senate primaries, in the Louisiana Senate primary where Bill Cassidy, who voted for impeachment, got his ass handed to him. We're going to see it today probably in Kentucky, where Thomas Massie is going to lose. His crime isn't that he's not sufficiently MAGA. He's arguably more conservative and more MAGA than MAGA is, but he just doesn't want to protect pedophiles. He draws the line there. And so the looking at the influence in control that Trump is able to exert among primary voters, Republican primary voters, it's so much different than what is needed for these candidates to then turn around and be in viable positions to win in competitive states, in competitive districts. I mean, we saw it today with Texas, with Trump endorsing the disgraced, impeached by a Republican legislature in Texas, Attorney General Ken Paxton, who gives the Democrats their best opportunity to pick up a Senate seat in Texas, I think, since Lloyd Benson. So, I mean, that's he comes from the Voting Rights Act legislature, congressional delegation from Texas. And so, this will be the first time since we haven't had a Dixiecrat Democrat in Texas or with a viable shot to win. And so what Trump is able to do is he's able to exert his almost iron grip, because Republicans by and large have decided that being in power and being in office, being a U.S. senator or a governor or a member of Congress is more important to them than their oath to the Constitution, than their country over party, or being able to separate right from wrong. They're willing to sacrifice all of that if they can, if they can show up somewhere to vote in, House of Representatives or in a legislative capital or in the U.S. Senate, and someone's going to fawn over them. They would rather keep that power.
Jeff, what do you make of Trump waiting 76 full days to do this? Because that seems immensely an example of impulse control that he rarely shows.
Yeah, well, especially after the primary in Texas at the beginning of March, it's been a long time. The conventional wisdom was all the word was he was going to be endorsing Cornyn, that John Thune and the Senate Republicans had sufficiently snake charmed the White House political operation that they were going to get behind Cornyn, and that never happened. And now I think the reason is twofold. I think one, Paxton's win has likely become inevitable. That's what the polling is showing. And so Trump, for all of the mystique that's been afforded or attributed to him, like he's like this, he can move mountains and make magic with an endorsement in a primary. Yeah, but usually what Trump does, he doesn't pick a long shot and they catapult to the top. He sees where the parade is going and he jumps out in front and tries to lead it. And so he was waiting here, wanted to make sure Paxton was where his inclination. Paxton's a criminal. Paxton was under federal indictment. He was he's corrupt. He was impeached by Republicans in Austin. He's got his womanizer problems. He is everything that Trump admires. He's corrupt, and Cornyn isn't. Trump didn't want to endorse Cornyn. Cornyn is a pre-2015, pre-Trump kind of Republican who's wearing a MAGA suit when it suits him. He found out, just like Bill Cassidy did, that there's no loyalty. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube if you've ever crossed Trump. I mean, with Cassidy, it was the impeachment vote. With Cornyn, it's trying to govern and uphold the Constitution and adhere to the rule of law by and large. And those are disqualifying traits in today's Republican Party.
But there have been some Republicans like Marco Rubio, like J.D. Vance, that did publicly criticize Trump, and they have been able to prostrate themselves before Trump and become MAGA loyalists anew. So what should Bill Cassidy and John Cornyn have done if they wanted to get Trump on side so that maybe they would still be in the Senate?
Well, you take the same approach that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio done, and you bend over and you take it.
That's a great.
That's
the
truth.
Yeah.
You have to substrate yourself. You have to You have to submit yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to give in to Donald Trump in the Gimp mask and have him take over your life. It's just that simple.
Yeah. It's not good enough just to usher
pressure and capitulation are one thing. This is domination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is S&M shit.
Yep.
Okay, there is like a homoerotic subtext here.
To everything you guys do.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that. If anything, in the second term, after his wins in the Indiana State Senate, the crime of those senators, these Republican senators, mind you, was they didn't vote for Trump's thumb on the scale midterm redistricting plan in Indiana, and so they were. It's like that scene in the Kevin Costner, Robert De Niro Untouchables movie where De Niro as Al Capone is walking around the big conference table where all the guys from the organized crime are sitting around, and he's talking about baseball, and he's got the bat, and he takes the bat to one of the guys' head, he smashes his head like a watermelon in front of everybody. It makes an example. And that's what Trump has a sadist gene. He loves humiliating people. If anybody watched Succession, he loves doing the bore on the floor. Get down, humiliate yourself, and grovel, and he loves doing that. He loves being able to dominate, as Joe said. And he's more bold now. He's not looking at his kind of political future in the way he was before, and he doesn't care about burning it all down behind him. And so he's not trying to, the Marco Rubios and Ted Cruz's and JD Vance's that he brought in to get him into the second term, he doesn't need more of them. He doesn't need a Bill Cassidy now groveling at his feet. He's got enough people doing that. And so I guess the dance card is full when it comes to toadies.
So Texas has always been fool's gold for Democrats for the last couple of decades. And we always get our hopes up and they're always dashed. But Ken Paxton represents probably as good of a target as Democrats can hope for to run against this year in the U.S. Senate. And there's also a really good Democratic nominee, James Tallarico. He's a pastor. He's leading in some of the polling there. So, Joe, I have to ask you, do you think that this could actually be the year for Democrats in Texas?
I gotta say, I've been a naysayer about dumping money in the giant sucking pit of Texas, as the Democrats do multiple times. But we're looking at really the total collapse of the Republican Party, and a border in Texas you can't gerrymander your way out of this particular problem. You've seen Trump's numbers crater among the two groups that put him there: young people and young people and Hispanic voters. There's a whole lot of those in Texas. So the ball game has changed, and it's pretty clear from all the pieces moving that people are starting to realize that Tallarico actually has a real shot, and this may be something you want to invest in.
I agree completely. I mean, when you look at some of the polls out this week, and there's been a lot of good national polls out, and they continue to show the same kind of trend where the Democratic wave, and I will now call it a wave, continues to build. It's not plateaued. There's no abating. All the forces, the economic forces, the oil, gasoline price pressures that have been exacerbating the Trump tariff pressures, all of these voters recognize that this is all the creation of one person. This is Donald Trump, and the Republicans' inability to stand up or unwillingness to stand up to them created this. And it has created a circumstance where the generic ballot test now on congressional races is Democrats plus 13, 14, 15. Among independents, we're seeing plus 30 in some of these states. In one of the national polls that was out this week, it showed even among non-college degree white voters, which has been Trump's bread and butter. We've got a high school degree, maybe some college, maybe not. Trump won those voters by like 40 points in 2024, and he's now upside down by 8 points on his job approval with those voters. I'm not saying that you're going to see a wholesale abandonment of white non-college voters from Trump, but any erosion from the Republican coalition at this point is the death knell for Republican candidates, or for Republican candidates. That's not to say in every district in every state, Wyoming, Trump is still, plus 25 on his job approval, but in Texas, in Iowa, in Ohio, in Alaska, in Montana, Senate seats where in normal Republican or normal election years where either party has where it's a jump ball, it's truly a purple election, would have no shot at those seats. But right now, Democratic candidates need really one thing to be viable, and that's a pulse. If they're exceptional candidates like Tallarico, who's raising money like he's printing it, he's like Beto O'Rourke on steroids when it comes to raising money. And quite honestly, with the profile that he has as a very centrist Dem, a pro-gun, evangelical Democrat, is a very strange profile for most races around the country, but it fits really well in Texas and gives an option for those disaffected Republican voters to choose this fall.
One thing I like about him, he's not afraid to talk about religion and how religion informs his political decisions. And normally that's not something I particularly care for in a politician, but when you see the rise of Christian nationalism, and both the candidates and both Senate candidates in Texas are, of that ilk, I think it's good to put someone on the battlefield who can speak that language authentically. And that's something Tallarico can do in spades.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about gerrymandering, because Republicans got a huge assist from the Supreme Court with the Clay decision a couple of weeks ago. And Republicans have wasted no time in southern states like Alabama and Tennessee in redrawing maps so that there is zero Democratic representation, zero representation for Black populations in those states. This is kind of a Hail Mary pass for Republicans so that they can somehow hang on to the House. Jeff, do you think it's going to work?
No.
And let's talk about the implications, though, beyond 2026.
Well, beyond 2026, it's a different story potentially. But right now, I mean, it's too big to rig the wave that is building. I mean, that's the thing. The Greg Abbott Republican gerrymander in Texas is going to prove to be a fool's errand, as a lot of these districts that they drew to take safe Republican districts down to not so safe. I mean, when they thought a +10, they took a +20 districts, Trump +20 down to maybe a +10 district. That's not safe in a year like this, and they're going to
they base those districts on Hispanic 2024 performance.
Yeah,
and when you're sucking 30 points down from that base, you've got a situation where this could be one of the biggest self-owns in political history.
Yeah, in South Carolina, which hasn't moved yet, they didn't in their regular legislative session, which has concluded, redistrict, but apparently the governor is calling a special session to revisit this. James Clyburn, who's long time, he was retired now, leadership in the House Democrats, the head, the political titular head of the Congressional Black Caucus. He's not the actual head, but one of the most astute practitioners of elective politics in the country, says that the Republicans ought to be careful because they could lose up to 3 districts in South Carolina if they continue like this. And yes, you have to assume maybe there's a little bit of bravado in his statement, but not too much. I mean, they're going to slice their margins thin enough in those districts that they try to squeeze the oxygen out of Democratic chances, that they end up cutting themselves short in several districts. So rather than just leave one Democratic district or no Democratic districts, Clyburn might be right. And you're going to see that kind of phenomenon potentially repeat across some of the old Cotton South where they're looking to do this. Alabama, Georgia isn't going to do this until 2028, but they're likely to redraw after this election. Louisiana, Mississippi is a possibility. But there was a good article out today in Larry Sabato's newsletter, another one. They've been really doing a good job of digging into this, the redistricting wars, who's gaining how many seats. And they say, if you make the argument, in the best case scenario, Republicans have gained 10 seats, maybe. That's wishful thinking at this point through redistricting.
But this wave is 40 to 50 seats.
Well, that's what he said. Yeah, the wave is 40 plus. So, they can withstand, though those 10 seats aren't going to make a difference. They might make the wave a little less big, but there's still going to be a wave. They're still going to switch majority. Now, 2028, different turnout, different circumstances, who knows? 2030, before the next redistricting, who knows? But I mean, right now, people who have never paid attention to gerrymandering, redistricting, are being forced to drink from this fire hose, hear it all the time. If there's ever been a time for national constitutional reform that deals with congressional districting, why the districts, as they grow toward 1 million people, far bigger than was intended. Not that we should have districts limited at 30,000 population like the Constitution first said back in 1789. We'd have more than 11,000 members of Congress, God help us. But we could see some structural reform.
Don't discount that.
But yeah, I mean, so there could be a national groundswell. It just depends. I mean, there's going to
there has to be a national groundswell, and there has to be and I would look to any Democrat talking about 2028, which is increasingly almost all of them. that there has to be a national recommitment to democratic organization, democratic institutions, or a return to norms, and a solution to the rot that we've endured. And this predates Trump. A lot of this stuff had to be done beforehand, and we didn't get to it. Now it's given birth to him. So we have to recommit ourselves to that in the future.
I want to ask you, Joe. So we have seen that Democrats have been kind of really behind on this redistricting war. Republicans are loaded for bear. They're canceling elections in Louisiana. They are switching around the district boundaries in Tennessee after ballots have gone out. They're willing to do anything by hook or by crook. Meanwhile, Democrats won a redistricting ballot initiative in Virginia. The Supreme Court threw out everybody's vote, millions of votes throughout the entire election, and Democrats folded instead of fighting. What do Democrats have to do to fight back so that this can be anywhere close to a fair playing field?
They got to check their scruples at the door. This is going to be the proverbial knife fight in the phone booth. Decisions are going to be made that you're not going to like, that will hurt people in the short term. But you have to win elections. I mean, that's how we do this. And if we resort to extra election solutions, we've lost the fight. So we have to reconstitute ourselves to being a contrast. Thankfully, that is not too hard. Although you have people, like Jared Polis, who are doing everything they can to undercut that. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. But that's where I see it going.
Jeff, you have called yourself a reformed gerrymanderer. You've been involved in the redistricting process in Michigan before we passed our independent redistricting commission constitutional amendment back in 2018. You've been on that side of things. Talk to us. It seems to me that Republicans really count on Democratic weakness. They count on Democrats playing by the rules, by upholding norms, whereas they throw all that out the window.
Yes, they do. In history, I mean, they assume that because that's been their experience over the course of time. In the aggregate, I'm not talking about every single Democrat, every single, who runs for office, or every operative, or
but it group. Certainly is the aberration.
Yeah. And so they count on that. And I would, if the Democrats win in Michigan, as I expect that they will, and I would say with certainty they would, if there wasn't the independent Mike Duggan, the mayor of Detroit, running as an independent, a third candidate running for governor. That's the only thing that puts a question mark in my mind on whether the Democrats will control the legislature and the governor's office in 2027. But because Michigan would be like California or Virginia, they would need to pass a statewide vote to temporarily allow the legislature to redistrict, like was done, or to pass a redistricting plan one way or the other, like they did in California. And I would urge my friends, allies in the Michigan Democratic Party to pursue that very stridently after this election. This is going to have to be part of the purge and the healing. We need to get rid of MAGA from our politics. Yeah, we need tribunals. We need reconstruction.
If I can't have Sherman solutions, I want a tribunal.
Right, absolutely. And so, you fight the fight you're in, not the fight you wish you were in. And you can't stand on your soapbox of altruism and expect to be politically viable. I mean, that's the lesson here. What's the right thing to do from a theoretical standpoint isn't necessarily what needs to be done in the short term to survive politically. And that's why we've seen these redistricting fights. The Democrats did join the game with California, with Virginia, to change existing rules, kind of hold their nose, a lot of Democratic voters, and do the power play to shove it back to the Republicans. And none of this would have happened if Texas and Greg Abbott and Donald Trump and the Republicans hadn't started the shooting. It's just like Iran. We're trying to clear, get the Straits of Hormuz open. They're trying to get the Straits of the redistricting Hormuz open so that we can start having normal political traffic. I mean, we're a long way from normal traffic happening in our politics.
Yeah. Democrats, pro-democracy forces, we need to be willing to fight as hard to save democracy as Republicans are willing to fight to break it. And that's an uncomfortable position, I think, for some people on our side, but that's just the game that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about before we move on to what's going on in Michigan. I do want to talk about Jared Polis and him commuting the sentence of Tina Peters, who was serving 9 years behind bars for tampering with election equipment, turning it over to the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. This was a pretty open and shut case. She was a dedicated J6er. She was trying to overturn the election for Donald Trump, the election that he lost. What the hell is a Democratic governor doing in commuting her sentence? Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
I think Jared Polis sees himself as some type of post-Trump fusion presidential candidate and has done everything he can to kind of walk through that straight, so to say. He's played footsie with the MAGA and Kennedy forces on vaccines. And now which is one of the lowest political moves I've ever seen. It's been rumored to have been happening for a long, long time, but I in the back of my head, maybe I'm just naive. I didn't expect it to actually happen. This was a woman who repeatedly and enthusiastically violated election laws. She has a violence problem. She's had numerous violent altercations in courtrooms, police stations, and prisons. She's unstable. Trump's going to put her on some kind of national election review board. That's almost certainly coming. So now she's going to be platformed nationally on every station there is. So the key here is to think where Polis wants to go. I think it's based on a lot of false assumptions, and really this is just a really scummy tactic.
Yeah, Polis he's like John Fetterman without the brain damage. He thinks he can be everything to everybody. Yeah. And he's completely misread the situation. And Tina Peters is now going to be she's going to get a big chunk of this $1.776 billion slush fund to pay the election deniers, all Trump's, all the J6ers and other people that he pardoned with our tax dollars. Right. In the most corrupt deal ever, that is a contingent factor. The IRS has agreed to drop all audits and look into anything related to Trump, the Trump family, his kids, his business.
We'll see the taxes now.
No, we're never going to see anything. It's just all done. It's going to be swept aside.
The IRS is wiping. That is so understandable. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're reaching a situation where, and Susan's heard some variation of this rant from me, where Trump's numbers are getting so low where he actually is going to lose all moral and public consent to do anything. People will understand this. And I really think it's symbolic, and it shows the rot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So from a strategy standpoint, how do you run effectively against Trump's corruption? How do you make voters care about that? Because there are a lot of double haters out there. They hate both parties. They think everybody's corrupt. You hear, this sentiment bubbling up like, well, everybody does what Trump does. But,
no,
that is so much.
If you want to successfully go after this, you have to make it a mirror image with his behavior on the economy. It can't just be an economic argument, and it can't just be a corruption argument. It has to be he's corrupt and selling you out.
Mm-hmm.
And here are
Absolutely.
the results: $5
Yep.
gas, $6 gas by the 4th of July.
Yep, it's getting worse. He keeps talking about the stock market. People's, even if those who have money in funds in the 401ks, if the stock market goes up, their retirement goes up, but they can't afford food and they can't afford gas and they can't afford to take their kids anywhere this summer because of Trump, and they know that.
And you have to focus that anger
Yep.
towards the corruption, but they cannot exist independent of each other.
Yeah, and he's going to keep adding to it. He's going to keep throwing fuel on the fire.
He's going to
pardon 250 people. Yeah, he's going to pardon 250 more people by the 4th of July in honor of our, people who corruptly pay him. All the people who committed financial fraud. If Bernie Madoff was still alive, he'd give him a pardon. But he's pardoning people people who steal from investors, people who, all of his cronies. They're all, this is a classic let them eat cake kind of moment. And all of these, the klepto class, the kleptocrats are living large and getting government largesse, no bid contracts and payouts from the government, while any normal person who committed those same kind of crimes or actions would be penalized, go to jail and pay fines, not get rewarded and pardoned.
So I know that we've all seen the interviews with people at the gas station, Trump voters, that they're like, I'm an idiot. I thought this guy was going to lower my prices. What was I thinking? How do we get more of those voters? What are the best messages to turn some of those people that did vote for Trump in 2024?
It's almost when your opponent is in the process of self-destructing, stay out of their way.
Yeah,
there's part of me says the Democrat, when I say the wave is building, Democrats only need a pulse to win many of these races. The complacency is certainly foolish. They need to run through the tape and really look at things in the way that you suggest there. But I don't think the messaging is that complicated. It's basic. It's basic family math. Are you better off? The classic question: are you better off than you were 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
But the trap in a midterm election like this is you're not going to get all those voters, but what you will get is them staying home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that has implications up and down the ballot.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk about the Michigan gubernatorial election, because on paper you would think this would be a layup for Democrats. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson won in 2022 by the largest margin of any Democrat running statewide. Has been pretty popular, but you've got a wrench in the system with former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who was very popular, helped turn the city around. He is running as an independent after being a lifelong Democrat. Meanwhile, you've got kind of a cast of thousands running on the Republican side. We don't know if Trump's going to endorse. So, Jeff, how do you see all of this playing out?
Well, I'm going to focus on the general election rather than the Republican primary right now, because Trump is the unknown factor in there. If he stays out,
right,
it's hard to say what's going to happen. If he gets in, he'll pick the winner. So,
but endorsed back in 2022 when there were 5 Republicans running, I think he endorsed like 48 hours before the primary.
Right,
again,
he jumped out in front of a parade at that point,
right,
and
right.
so we could expect to maybe see him do that again.
Yeah.
But when you look at where in every penny that the gas pump prices increase seems to be a point that goes into the collective likely vote total of Jocelyn Benson or the Democrats. Using Michigan as the example, Mike Duggan has independent candidates always have this mystique and appeal with voters. You know, voters don't like partisanship by and large. Most voters aren't partisan. Yeah, and so they start off as this blank slate that, oh, they're not a partisan. Well, you know, with Mike Duggan, he spent 40 years as an insider, the insideriest of the Democrats.
Right.
It's not like he's a Rick Snyder who had no real political involvement other than as a sometimes donor prior to his run for office. Right. If Mike Duggan was a true political outsider, it might be a different story. Even then, I'm still skeptical that an independent can ever actually win. That's why they don't. The forces are aligned against them. And so I do think that watching the race for the last year, forces supporting Duggan have spent $14-15 million to build him up. But all he's done, really, he entered the race at his high water mark. He continues to recede, go backwards. And the latest round, several polls show him now dipping back into the low 20s or teens as Jocelyn Benson has opened up a 10 or 12-point lead on John James, the Republican congressman, or Perry Johnson, the weird, looks like Martin Short doing a Christopher Walken impersonation, or Mr. Burns impersonation. I don't know. Self-funder guy who has more money than sense, that's for sure. Jocelyn Benson is leading them by double digits as Mike Duggan recedes in his support. And it's usually you hear Duggan in his campaign saying all the things, oh, we're just getting started. You know, we haven't even got, once you start going down, you usually don't go back up. I mean, that's just the way it goes. That, not to say that there isn't going to be some fluctuation and volatility in this race. I mean, that will be weird. And so I expect it to happen because nothing but weird things happen these days. But I don't see a way he can get to 30-40% and, you know, win a plurality. Michigan doesn't have a runoff like southern states. Right. Yet whoever gets one more vote and is able to withstand a recount, then their opponent wins. Even if that, you know, if we have three candidates who have 33 1/3 percent between them, whoever has the, you know, slightly more votes is going to win. They don't need a majority. And I just don't see Mike Duggan being able to muster that under any circumstance. The conventional wisdom, and I will say I share this, is that he can only play a spoiler. People have thought that he was going to take away more Democratic votes. Right now, that's not the case. Republicans
part of that is because his pox on both houses is really mostly focused at Democrats. Mm-hmm. He rarely criticizes Republicans, and he never criticizes Trump.
Yeah, right. And Republicans, there are this doesn't apply to the hardcore MAGA primary voters, but there are a swath of Republicans or center right voters who have been over time behavioral Republicans who aren't happy with what they've seen from the Republican Party. They don't want to support Trump. They don't want to support a Trump-nominated MAGA candidate for governor in Michigan, but they haven't had a place to go. They don't want to vote Democratic. That's just their DNA. So Mike Duggan becomes this attractive option for those Republican voters. And the Republican nominee, whoever it turns out to be, can't afford to lose a single member of their coalition. And right now, Duggan is taking more Republican votes. I mean, that's where we are as we approach Memorial Day. We'll see what it looks like.
I don't know how he shifts gears on that, though.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's a quagmire, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like he's played himself. You know, he made this decision very early on, right after Trump was elected. Trump did win Michigan, even though, you know, the entire state government apparatus, you know, save for the Michigan House, is controlled by Democrats. And I think he was making the bet that this was the smart play. The party was going too far left. He didn't think he could beat Jocelyn Benson in a primary, but the way that the state looks today is quite different than how it looked in November of 2024. And he's such a savvy political optimist.
His whole career he's built around seeing around the corners better than everyone else.
So
that's why I gave him enormous credence when this thing started, because I do believe he's the smartest man in Michigan politics. Next to Jeff.
But not on it.
No, Mike Duggan is a very smart operative. And his team, I respect the members of his team. And I have known them and worked with them on a lot of things for more than 30 years. And he does get, but he's not seeing around to the, he did not see where
he saw
this
around
was
the
going.
corner, but he came to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I don't think anybody could have foreseen how badly Trump would screw up. I mean, they knew Trump would screw up. They knew, everybody knew what Trump was, but I don't think they saw the sustained idiocy with tariffs. That's self-inflicted. Now the buffoonery, life and death buffoonery with Iran, how many times has he threatened them with obliteration today, or 2 more weeks, or we have a ceasefire, or the straits are open? He's just, he's being dog walked by everybody. And he's losing his, it's changing the dynamic in a way that nobody, even somebody, if you give Mike Duggan Nostradamus kind of qualities,
right?
He looked into his crystal ball and said, that can't be right. Trump can't screw things up that badly. And he calibrated on the wrong kind of model for what he needed to win. This election is, you could argue that there's the populist outsider vibe. I mean, that's what we live in, a constant change election. We have now for 10 years. We've lived in this constant change environment. But it's really, as long as you're not Donald Trump and you're a viable one of the other party, we're going to vote for you. And Mike Duggan doesn't fit in one of those boxes. And I just don't see him having the staying power. And you have to wonder how long are his donors going to keep opening up the wallets if he continues to plateau, stay where he is, doesn't get some traction, or contracts further in the polling. That's going to change things demonstrably.
He doesn't have the hammer of still being mayor of Detroit.
Right. So if the election were held today, do both of you think that Jocelyn Benson is the next governor of Michigan?
Unless something drastically changes, I see nothing out there that would change that outcome.
Yeah, today. I really do think that the Republicans in Michigan or the Democrats are going to have a trifecta unless something dramatic happens with the Trump interference. We're talking ICE or National Guard at polling places, contested delegations. Tom Barrett and Bill Huizenga lose, but the Republicans insist they didn't. And Mike Johnson, while he's still speaker, tries to seat the Tom Barrett and Bill Huizenga. We have their opponents who said, no, Sean McCann and Bridget Brink or whoever saying I won. We could see states sending competing delegations. We saw this back during Reconstruction after the Civil War, and then it becomes the House to decide its members. There probably will be litigation. We could see a period of uncertainty and turmoil, even if we, the majority of Americans who want free and fair elections, aren't necessarily Democrats. We oppose Donald Trump and MAGA. Even if we show up, we win. That doesn't mean it's going to stay one. We just have to start the second battle after the day after election, in between then and January 3rd, to make sure that the right people get seated. It's going to be 2020 do-over.
Are Democrats prepared for that? I know, Jeff, you do a podcast with Mark Brewer, who is a top election lawyer in Michigan, former Democratic Party chair. I mean, are Democrats ready to fight on that ground if Republicans continue to try and steal elections?
I think so, and that's not just in Michigan. This is around the country. Groups like the Democratic Attorney General's Association, the Secretary of State Association, tables that are set up where people like Mark Elias and others in the legal world they've been talking about this since we saw what happened after the 2020 election, how to harden elections, how to plan for these contingencies. There are all kinds of scenarios out there that are being discussed, planned for, gamed out, and I don't know that we can ever be fully prepared for an assault on our free and fair elections by the White House and the federal government. It's fairly unprecedented. We saw a little bit of that a lot of it in 2020 in the aftermath. But I think they're as prepared as they can be. I still worry that everybody involved, including myself, don't grasp the desperation and the lengths that Trump and MAGAs will go to. There's we still think, going back to that, they're going to punch above the belt, Marquise of Queensberry rules, and Trump and the MAGAs are going to go beneath the belt and use the collective balls as a speed bag, if that's what it takes to get themselves, to keep them in power, even if voters turn them out.
So let's end on the Michigan U.S. Senate race. This one has been not a top-tier race that, a lot of national forecasters have concentrated on, but it's definitely a must-win for Democrats if they have any hope of flipping the Senate. Senior Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat who will be on Lincoln Square next week, he's retiring at the end of this year, and there is a very intense primary going on the Democratic side to face Mike Rogers, who barely lost a U.S. Senate race back in 2024 when Trump did win the state. Alyssa Slotkin pulled out a win. She is a Democratic senator. But right now, I am seeing just, if you are on Blue Sky, this race is lighting up people. I know Twitter is not real life, but in Democratic primaries, sometimes it is. So we've got Abdul Al-Sayed, who unsuccessfully ran for governor in 2018, and he's really occupied the Bernie Sanders lane. Mallory McMorrow is a progressive, and she's been endorsed by Elizabeth Warren. She's gone viral for some of her speeches on the Senate floor. And then you have Haley Stevens, a congresswoman who flipped a very competitive congressional seat during the 2018 election. Really substantively, in terms of votes, I don't think that these candidates are going to vote terribly different on too many issues, but she's kind of been tagged as the moderate, establishment Dem of this race. What's going to happen? Because the polling is all over the place, Jeff.
One of them is going to win. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. Yeah. There on paper, you have three very interesting candidates. Haley Stevens, she flipped a longtime Republican district back in 2018. And then after redistricting in 2022, she beat Andy Levin, who folks outside of Michigan might not know. Carl Levin was his uncle, the longtime U.S. Senator from Michigan. His dad was the longtime Congressman Sander Levin, twice the Democratic nominee for governor. I mean, the Levins have been a force in Michigan politics since the early 1960s. And Haley Stevens beat Andy like a drum in that primary. But we saw the same dynamic, the AIPAC versus the anti-AIPAC forces lined up in that race. And that's what's playing out now. The difference is we have a three-way race. Mallory McMorrow also flipped a longtime Republican Senate seat in 2018. Yeah, she's not just a progressive from a safe seat. She beat a Nolenberg, long time, another political name. Right. Dad was a congressman. The senator who she beat was, the son of a longtime congressman and a longtime legislator in his own right. Mm-hmm. And so we've got some of those same dynamics. So the Gaza AIPAC thing, the uncommitted versus everybody else kind of dynamics are playing out here. And this is potentially a circumstance where could the Democrats snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by choosing wrongly in the primary? I mean, you can certainly make that case that Abdul El-Sayed is perhaps too progressive for Michigan, and when he said, and he's said publicly that his name is something that he has to overcome because there still is there's a reaction, a negative reaction by a lot of voters, especially center right voters in rural areas, to somebody with his name, and so that's a reality that he'll have to deal with. This could be the kind of year where the wave is big enough that none of that matters, and that all of this is much ado about nothing when it's all said and done.
I think a lot of this is much ado about nothing because I don't think El-Sayed is going to be competitive in this primary. I think he's going to. I think he's hit a ceiling. He's going to hit a ceiling real soon if he hasn't. I don't know that necessarily both either Stevens or McMorrow. I don't know if either of them will be there at the finish line. I have a suspicion that Haley Stevens could segue out. Also, you could see people who control the money just say we're not going to fund this. Yep.
Yeah, and although as long as the U.S. Senate control remains a viable option for Democrats, and it was a year ago, it wasn't. There was nobody thinking that the Democrats had a shot to take over the U.S. Senate. Now they do. Without that Gary Peters seat in Michigan staying in the Democratic column, it's really hard to see. I know we talked about Texas, but it's hard to imagine Republicans losing Texas but flipping Michigan. It really is. When you look at the Democrats, I can't really, I don't have enough expertise in Democratic primary voters to really determine how that's likely to go. But when I look at that race right now, the same polls that have shown Jocelyn Benson with opening up a big lead show Mike Rogers, the longtime Republican congressman, used to be anti-Trump. Then he ran in 2024 in a Republican or in an open seat, a Debbie Stabenow's open seat, lost to Alyssa Slotkin by less than 18,000 votes and is running again. He's tied, effectively, statistically tied with any of the three Democrats running. And the Rogers campaign and the Michigan Republicans and the national Republicans are all crowing about that.
Right.
Well, listen, Mike Rogers just had $75 million spent on his behalf in 2024 and almost won. And he shows up in these polls tied against people who have never run statewide, have no profile. They're effectively a generic Democrat versus a generic Republican. That's what we're seeing right now. Mike Rogers, after $75 million and 30 years in politics, polls no better than if any of the three of us were on the ballot as a Republican running for the U.S. Senate right now. But that's the reality.
He does have a clear shot. He doesn't have to worry about a messy primary. And I happen to see nonstop commercials from him selling himself not as a Republican, but as a
common sense problem solver.
Exactly. And clearly he is banking on the fact that if Abdul El-Sayed is the nominee, that is his best path to the Senate.
It's the only path he has.
Yeah.
Only path he has.
That money will all get shifted into Alaska and Texas if El-Sayed is not the nominee, because either Stevens or McMorrow will clean the state up.
Yep. I agree with that.
So, Jeff, Joe thinks that Abdul El-Sayed has hit his ceiling. What is your sense of how things are shaking out in the primary? Because the primary is not until August. That's a ways away, and this race could shift considerably.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch because right now the primary has largely been playing out on social media. There hasn't been a ton of money spent other than on social media ads by Stevens, McMorrow, or El-Sayed. We haven't hit the June, July, before our early August primary stride yet, where we start to really get into the intensity of the campaign. I tend to agree with Joe, as I've learned to do over, especially when talking about Democratic politics. But I think that it's hard to see El-Sayed getting, adding to this coalition right now, getting, if you look at these polls, like he and Stevens and McMorrow are all grouped somewhere in the mid to low 20s with a huge undecided. It's hard to see him shooting up into the mid 30s, into the 40s. It's just, so I guess I would agree. The ceiling is probably lower for him than it is for either of the other two candidates, and they have higher floors.
So before we go, I do want to ask about this dynamic in really competitive Democratic primaries where there is this intense infighting on social media. And it really, like, when you look at Republican primaries, it's very straightforward. Who loves Donald Trump the most? Who wants to deport the most immigrants? It's all about who do you hate? How much do you love Trump? For the Democratic primary, it kind of takes on this weird morality play. You know, who is morally superior? Who is the morally correct candidate? And they spend so much time beating up on one another and saying, you know, Haley Stevens is the Antichrist because she's taken AIPAC money and she's too moderate. And it seems like it exists in a plane where Donald Trump doesn't exist. His name is not brought up. It's all about, I'm a better Democrat than you. I'm a real progressive.
It's mostly driven by online leftists who have nothing else to do but pick at each other and pick at other people who may want to take out Trump. It's the horseshoe. It's really just quite that simple.
And well, what is this? I mean, is this foreshadowing for a very messy 2028 Democratic primary for president?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
How do we avoid the shit show so
you
that
don't.
we move on from
you got to endure it and go through.
Yeah, we have to have Joe Biden suddenly retake the White House and then back out, and just Kamala Harris steps back in, and we saw this before. That was how you avoid a messy primary. It didn't work out. It's going to be a messy primary.
Okay. Well, and we will definitely want to talk with you, Jeff, as we move forward in that process. Thank you both for being here. This was a lot of fun for me. I hope that you enjoyed talking to some of the best strategists that I know about races all over the country. Joe, Jeff, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Thanks, Susan.
having us.
And thank you for joining us.